Hey, fourth grade Patriots, Miss Greco here to give you an overview of your week 5 of distance learning. That is for the week of April 27th. Can you believe that we are already on week 5? I don't know if time is flying by or dragging by. Sometimes I feel like it's fast and sometimes I can't believe how slow it feels. But either way, we are real proud of how wonderful you guys are doing with distance learning. We appreciate all that you're doing to try to make this as successful as possible. We know this is not an ideal situation. It's not anything that any of us love or want, but we are making the best of it. And we appreciate you and we appreciate your families for making this work. So a few reminders. Here's our overview. This should look familiar to you. So over here you have your reminders reminding you to check your inbox, to check your announcements, to check grades. Now, a couple things you're going to start noticing, Patriots, is with grades, you might notice that some of your assignments now look like they are red. That is because teachers are now marking assignments as missing. So if you have not turned in some of your assignments over the last 4 weeks, they will now show up as red when you look at your grades. This is really important that at some point you try to go back and complete missing assignments. Remember, you can complete missing assignments until the very last day of school. We really need you to try to get as many assignments completed as possible to help for your report card grade. Remember, we are still grading here. The other thing we wanted to point out with grades is that you may see a low score for one of your grades. So if you see something like a 1 as your score, it is really important that you go back in there and you see the reason why you received that low score of a 1 on any assignment. A lot of times if you're receiving a 1, it's because the teacher is actually trying to draw your attention to this assignment because they have left you a comment about something that you need to fix. Maybe you uploaded the wrong assignment and they just need you to know that you submitted the wrong one. Or maybe you misunderstood the directions and they're drawing your attention to how you can fix it. So if you see a grade of a 1, you really need to be going in and looking at those comments that the teachers have left you. The other thing that is new this week that we have added is your teachers have a weekly Zoom time, and that has now been included on the reminders. So in addition to emailing your teachers if you need some support, you can also join a weekly Zoom time with them. And here you have all 4 of your teachers that have a scheduled time. So let's dig into what week 5 of distance learning is going to look like. So for you guys this week, for science, they are recommending that you take 2 days to complete each of the science lessons. So the first science lesson, 3.08, is causing change, and what you submit for that assignment is an actual activity. And that activity can be found on the last page of the lesson, and then you would submit. Lesson 3.09 is called Waves of Change, and for that lesson, you are completing a quiz. For math this week, you are ending one module and moving into the other. So you are wrapping up module 6 with lessons 15 and 16, and then you are beginning module 7 with lessons 1 and 2. So for those concept developments, keep that in mind, Patriots, that you are switching from one module to the next. So some of the standards are going to be different. You're moving into a new chunk of learning. So with those problem sets, that's the work that you have this week to complete and submit for math. Remember, there's only specific problems that you need to complete. So for example, on problem set 15, you're only working on questions 2, 8, 12, and 15. For problem set 16, it's just number 4, module 7, lesson 1, you're just doing problems 1, 2, and 3, and then for lesson 2, you're completing problems 1 and 2. So when you are completing those problem sets, remember, you don't have to do all the problems. You just have to do the ones that are must-dos or are required. But of course, if you want extra practice or you want to go above and beyond, you can always do the whole thing. So for ELA this week, we're again asking you to take 2 days to complete the lessons. And Patriots, I'm going to be honest with you, it's a lot this week. For the next 3 weeks, you have some significant writing assignments that might not be turned in with each lesson, but are going to be really important to complete because they connect throughout the week. And I'm going to dig into that in the next slide in just a second. But I really need you to take your time through these ELA lessons. So the first lesson you have this week is 11.1. differences between genres, and saving money. And then you also have the lesson 11.2, which is describing story elements, also with the text titled Saving Money. So what do you actually have to complete this week? Well, you do have an optional pretest, so that's because you're starting a new chunk of learning here with lesson 11. So there is the optional pretest. And then for the first lesson, 11.01, you actually are turning in 2 assignments, Patriots, and neither one of them is a quiz. So the first one you're turning is referred to as Poems and Stories response. So in the next slide, you'll see, and I'll point this out to you, there's a specific page within the lesson that poses a question to you after you complete a graphic organizer. And that response to that question is what you are turning in. So it's really important that you're paying attention to this next slide. Then you are also completing a narrative writing graphic organizer. So you are starting a new piece of writing that is going to begin here in week 5, and you will turn it in. You'll turn in parts of it along the way, but the final copy of it won't be due until week 7. So it's important that you're staying on top of it. But for this week, you're turning in the graphic organizer. Then when you get to the second lesson for ELA this week, you are just completing a quiz for that. For social studies, you have 1 lesson this week. It's called Starting with the Basics, and you have a quiz for that as well. Don't forget to complete your daily independent reading and then turn in your weekly reading log. You also have a music, art, and PE. Now, we know PE is a daily activity with that weekly reading log. This week in art, you are looking and studying tessellations, one of my favorite geometric art projects is creating tessellations, and then you're going to be turning in a picture of your art project. Now for music this week, you are wrapping up the classical period and spending some time learning about Beethoven, but there's a really important note to understand about this assignment this week for music. You have 2 different pieces that you're going to have to complete. You have a quiz, but you also have a summary to complete. Now the way the grade is going to work is some of the grade will be scored by the My Learning system, but some of it has to be scored by Miss Reed. So she is asking that you do not retake the music quiz until she has had a chance to grade the parts of the activity or the assignment that she has to grade. So she wants you to hold off on retaking that quiz more than the first time until you give her a chance to score it, okay? So that I put that note in there, but it's really important that you do that. All right, so let's dig in. I'm going to slide on down. We're going to look at this overview of ELA because there's some really important things you need to know. So for writing in your ELA lessons for this week, remember we break it up into 2 sections. So here you have the 2 different lessons that you're doing. And then we break it up in 3 sections. So we have a section where these are the activities that are embedded in the lesson that are just meant to practice skills. Then we have less activities embedded in the lesson where you have to do something that is either for that current assignment that you're going to be asked to turn in, or you're going to need to work on it because it's going to be required for an assignment later on. And then we have the section of what am I actually submitting. So I tried to give you a little more information this week, Patriots, because it's real important that you're not missing some stuff. So for the first lesson, 11.1 in ELA, you are just, the only thing that is going to be to practice and reinforce skills that will have nothing to do with an upcoming assignment or current assignment. It may, however, be on a quiz, is this context clues graphic organizer, and that can be found on page 3. The other thing, so moving on to the work that needs to be completed for upcoming assignments, you can see that it looks like quite a bit of work. And I'll be honest, Patriots, it is a little bit of work. So page 7, you're going to be reading 2 texts, and those texts are called For a Rainy Day and Funding Drums. And it's important that if you can download these onto your device and save them for later, it would be really helpful to you to have them. They do refer back to them in later lessons, but it would just be easier for you if you could keep them on your device. Also on page 7, this is the question I was referring to that you're going to have to turn in. On your own paper, they are not providing you with a document. On your own paper, you need to answer the question, What is the difference between how the authors show the main characters or speakers' feelings about saving money? And in order to answer this question, you have to use evidence from both of those texts found on page 7. And you also have to refer to the structural elements of each text to support your response. So keep in mind that's a pretty hefty question that you have to answer, and they want you to refer to both of these texts in that answer. So I highlighted here that this response is one of the assignments to submit. Then on page 9, you're starting to move into what is your new writing piece. And the new writing piece is going to be a narrative writing. So you're going to be working on a narrative writing for this week as well as week 6 and week 7. So this is your prompt. The prompt is given to you on page 9, and you're asked to brainstorm a mind map for this prompt. Imagine you woke up one morning and found that you were a superhero. Think about what it would be like and what kind of superhero you would be. What would you do? Write a story. So that is where the brainstorming comes in on page 9. But if we jump down to page 11, that's actually where the graphic organizer comes in. And this graphic organizer is one of your assignments that you must submit. But the other thing that's important about this graphic organizer is that you need this graphic organizer for week 6 and 7. So don't throw it away because you've turned it in this week. You want to make sure you're hanging on to that for next week, okay? And so these are your 2 assignments that you have. You have the answer to that question needs to be submitted in the writing graphic organizer. Now that was just the first ELA lesson this week. The second ELA lesson this week has a lot more activities embedded in the lesson that are meant to practice and reinforce skills. You have a graphic organizer that is partially is provided for you, and here you're completing the character section on page 5, you're completing the setting and event section on page 6, and then you're using this graphic organizer to write a summary on page 6, and then on page 9 there's an amazing appositives activity, and the anchor chart for that can be found on page 8. So the work that you need to be focused on for what's going to be either due this week or upcoming is on page 11. You're using that narrative writing graphic organizer that you just finished in the previous lesson to write your introduction, okay? And you can find that graphic organizer. There's an example of one that you can look at on page 10. Again, I put this note in here that you need to continue working on this narrative writing in week 6 and week 7. So by the end of this week 5 of Learning Patriots, when it comes to your narrative writing, you should have completed your brainstorming mind map. You should have completed and submitted your graphic organizer, and you should have completed your introduction paragraph. If you have done those 3 things for this writing piece, then you're on track for week 6. And then for the second ELA lesson that you're just submitting, you're just answering questions on a quiz. Now, I know it seems like a lot, Patriots, but we believe in you. Remember, you have 5 days. Try to map out how you're going to do your work. Focus on some of the parts that might be a little bit more of a challenge when you're feeling fresher in the day. I know I like to do my hard stuff first thing in the morning. So just remember that we are all here to support you. Your teachers are here if you need anything. Mr. Hogue, Ms. Sturm, myself, Ms. Harris, we are all here if you need anything. We believe that you are keeping on with this, and we know that you are going to do your absolute best. Let us know if you need anything, and we hope you have a great week of distance learning.